And first of all, welcome everybody, and I will introduce everyone shortly. But firstly, thank you sincerely to everyone for participating. As you know, we've had to postpone our face-to-face event, and we will run it later in the year. So today's event is essentially a digital version, a shortened version of what we were going to do today at 9 o'clock. There's a couple of people that I need to thank, and I'll start with Nati, who have very generously sponsored this and supported us in all kinds of ways, including promoting the event to interpreters, translators, and the entire network. So I will now introduce a couple of people that you can see on your screens, and I will start with RANA. Hello, RANA.
Hi.
RANA is going to be introduced in more detail by Amy, who you're seeing next, and Amy will also introduce herself in a moment. We also have the wonderful Maria Dimopoulos there on your screen, who has been a real champion of the translating and interpreting industry for many, many years. She's very experienced. We're very grateful to have her. Next, we have Travis, who works at Polaron as an account manager. And we also have Agata, who's our senior project manager at Polaron. We have Oscar there in headphones and looking very futuristic, I have to say. We'll also be joined by Alison from CH, and who else is participating? And I think that's it. So we will move on to our presentation that's going to be delivered by Travis and Agata. Travis, we cannot see you on the screen, so if you could get your face up, that'd be great.
Yep. So I'm having a few issues with the actual camera itself, but can you hear me loud and clear over the mic?
Otherwise, we'll get Agata to start.
Can you hear me right now? Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
I hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can everyone hear me, sorry?
Yes, Trav, we can hear you.
Yep, awesome. Thank you so much, Amy, for that. So yeah, let's get started and let's talk about technology and its impact on communication. Now, we all know technology was integrated into society with the idea of refining everyday life, obviously improving the way we communicate, access information, and actually innovate our ideas to the world. As a result of this, we are now actually faced with a very daunting prospect, which is the possibility of artificial intelligence and advanced machinery actually replacing the human mind and seeing its introduction as a recognized member of the modern workforce actually become a reality. There's a few questions that come with that. Are we actually moving towards a time where translations, the foundation of universal communication, is no longer actually being created by tangible experiences, but rather generated by memory robots? With the rise of new and emerging communities, are we able to trust linguistic databases and their ability to generate suitable resources for cold communities? Will Google Translate actually take over the language services industry and render certification as a thing of the past? These are all quite sophisticated and challenging concepts, but are they really an indication of the future? When it comes to creating a particular resource, I'm sure we can all agree that multimedia definitely has its perks. The use of subtitles, videography, and sound have become widely popular over the last decade, and its contribution to how organizations and customers interact is actually quite remarkable. By enhancing the way we communicate by using these tools, we are actually able to break down barriers between the consumer and provider by presenting information that they actually want to see in an easy to understand manner. We were actually tasked with creating this solution a few months ago in conjunction with Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission and the assistance of animation, subtitles and voice recording. We were actually able to connect various communities and individuals with valuable updates to elderly care guidelines in over 25 different languages. The result was amazing. Having actually worked closely on this project, I can't tell you enough how rewarding it is to see the final videos after months of dedication and hard work. The decision to actually present the data via audio-visual means, as opposed to, say, a fact sheet or a poster, was very successful, and the reception that we actually received from the outer communities was overwhelming, to say the least. Speaking of culturally diverse areas, another great method to actually solidifying and a very effective resource is the assistance of a community focus group. These targeted group discussions will actually allow your intended communities to return first-hand feedback regarding content that will actually disseminate successfully within a community, and point out certain terminology that needs to be reviewed prior to the translation process. These facilitated conversations can also bring to the forefront your main ideas that you actually want to communicate in each language. And what this does is spreads awareness on the desired issues before the finalized information of the resource is actually even available to the general public. We also obviously need to take into consideration things like education levels of our selected demographic, and the impact that it actually has on how an idea is presented. These factors can include intellectual disabilities, economic status, and poor literacy standards, which are all matters that are present in our current society. And we need to actually acknowledge and adapt to this accordingly. This includes a stripped back approach to actually writing material, which is a very valuable mindset to have. And with the ease of actually integrating simple English into everyday resources, simplifying content nowadays actually has never been easier. This is especially notable and needs to be kept in mind when we're talking about scientific and medical information, as individuals viewing this information should be able to understand matters that especially pertain to their personal health very easily without much difficulty. But in summary, technology obviously now contributes to the overall quality of everyday communication. I'm sure we can all agree that. But is this mentality applicable or available to all situations? The actual art of face-to-face interpreting seems to be declining heavily outside of the legal system. Organisations and businesses are actually resorting to posters or leaflets to satisfy a large niche of a community, when in fact a minute group of people prefer in-person communication to actually better understand a resource or a particular topic. The human aspect of our service is something that we should not forget. I feel, and I think that we need to have processes in place that allow us to reach our entire audience rather than just a large portion. So in summary, and overall, culturally diverse communities actually have a huge impact on how technology is utilised, which is evident obviously over the last decade. But how do humans themselves match up against machines? I will now actually pass you on to my lovely colleague Agatha, who will actually explore the idea of mankind against technology, the benefits and weaknesses of Google Translate, and why we should actually harness the tools available to us to actually improve our efficiency in communication, as opposed to viewing machines as the enemy.
Thank you, Travis. So let's start and talk more about the technology. So advancement in the technology. Many people think about technology as something that it's a threat for people. So they believe that machines will take human jobs over. And today I will tell you why we think that there's nothing to be afraid. And even more, that we can be best friends with those super smart robots. So instead of thinking about technology as something that it's made to replace humans, we see it rather as a significant aid to our everyday life. So people used to be scared to travel by train 50 kilometers per hour because that seems to be too fast. And it's just like that with AI. At Polaron, we are focusing on advantages, and it can bring us, especially and maybe only, when used by qualified professional translators. When talking about machines, we must mention Google Translate, tool that is accompanying our everyday life, allowing us to translate a web page with just one click of a button. It's easy to use. Some web pages are even translated automatically, But is it perfect? Let's talk about common misconceptions about this tool. So Google Translate appears to be free. However, fixing the translation can cost a lot of money and time. You need to fix the style and tone, and sometimes the whole meaning is not there. Machines are not good in understanding the context. Google doesn't know its target audience, the purpose of translation, and Polaron, on the other hand, can help you prepare a tailored solution, prepare the personalized content for your specific community. And Google Translate can handle that. Also remember that Google owns everything you put into it, so including translations. So you may be breaching confidentiality. Another point to add is that rare and emerging languages are not catered by machines. To allow machines to translate, you need to provide a lot of data of existing translation to train them. If the language is rare and there is not much text that you can find online, there's issues sourcing community members also who can verify the Google models. And is it true that Google Translate has improved a lot over the years, but there's still no real guarantee of accuracy? And let me just quickly find an example for you. Just 1 second.
Gata, do you need me to, do you want to share something?
No. I just have the example from the article. Okay, I have it. So there is an article, use of Google Translate in medical communication. And the scientists describe there how accurate is Google when it comes to translating the medical documentation. So authors choose the 10 commonly used medical statements that, and these were translated via Google Translate. And what was the result? So for example, in Polish, your husband has the opportunity to donate his organs was translated to your husband can donate his tools. And for example, your wife needs to be ventilated in Bengali was translated to your wife want movement needed. So it seems funny, but translation like this can have very serious consequences. Many people just say, just Google it, but we need to remember that this is not the answer for everything. So we believe that human proofreading will be still extremely important in the next millennium. And what is the reason for that? Machines can't examine the English text for grammatical or logical errors and will not ask if the source is correct. They will translate it as it is in a schematic way. Big concept can be described in a sequence of simple tasks. However, machine will have issue to consolidate the ideas. And this can result in source documents being translated incorrectly. So people winning with machines also when it comes to creativity. If you don't believe me, just watch The Sunspring. This is a movie that was directed by an artificial intelligence. It's interesting, but doesn't make any sense. And I will be anxious about the future of translation only when machines will be able to write books or scripts that are more enjoyable than those that are wrote by humans. Machines cannot understand metaphors, jokes, lies, irony. They are getting better at matching words within the context, but generally they're struggling with abstract social intelligence, complex perception, creating ideas, and with seeing the general scope of the document. What's more, machines don't have emotions. We should remember that their intelligence depends on the programmers and the training set. Over the last decades, we experienced breakthroughs that show technological advancement in communication and how it's affecting the translation industry. Even the latest issues with coronavirus are showing us how important it is to have possibility to work remotely and to have like possibility to speak with people over the whole world using communicators. Good internet connection allowing us to do this. Today, people access digital resources more often than printed ones. We are translating more and more video scripts and websites. Translation is no longer enough to communicate well with communities. We need to focus also on the design aspects and tailoring resources to be appropriate for cultural groups. How we see the future of translation? So programs such as Trados, so memory engines, will be widely used by all translators in the community. and will allow them to achieve consistency and quality throughout the translation, and enabling them to be more efficient at the same time. We will see the rise of multimedia, the design aspect, and also the voice recording will become more popular. In many industries in the world, the documents are digitalized. So there will be an increasing demand for fast but accurate translation at the same time. And to sum up, AI is a massive opportunity for those who can adapt to the new reality. We believe that in the next few years, machine translation will be used by translators to create consistent content, and the translator will be responsible for post-editing. So he will need to check and proofread the text. As a translation company, we will be focusing on a quality translation verified by professionals and by community. We will be helping with design, video editing, voice recording, and preparing the source to be written simple or tailored for a specific community. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Gat. I also just wanted to take this opportunity real quick just to thank Eva for actually allowing us the opportunity to present today. And I just want to wish everyone, all the attendees and panelists alike, I just want to wish you all a safe few weeks as we deal with this ongoing pandemic with the coronavirus. Thank you so much, guys.
Oh, well, there was a lot of very interesting points and things that we should consider and think about when we communicate with our diverse audiences. It is a challenge, particularly in languages that are rare and emerging, as Agata and Travis had mentioned. And I think the point out of all of that is that we need to look for creative, engaging ways of communicating with our diverse audiences that are genuine. Because I think it's fair to say that wherever we are in the world, there's a lot of information coming at us in all kinds of different ways. What that means is that some of it may be inaccurate, some of it might be confusing. So I think if we all work towards creating clarity and I guess simplicity of the message, they'll go a long way with making people more included in conversations, because for some communities it takes, particularly those ones that are smaller or less visible, I guess, you know, a lot of the time service providers will go for top 5 or top 10 or top 20 languages, leaving many people out of the loop. So it's really important to include people that might not come up on statistics or on demographic data every time, because it's likely that they're smaller in numbers, but very much higher in need. They may be more frail, less engaged. So whenever we look at who we're translating for, we take all those things into consideration. So thank you, Travis and Agata. I'll hand over to Amy now to firstly introduce the other presenters, or herself too, to tell us what she's been doing in this space for many years now. And what we're hoping for this conversation to be is, you know, to be engaging, robust, and I want to say positive, because we have been all hearing lots of bad news out there. So we wanted to keep this session really optimistic, because all of this too shall pass, and eventually we'll be able to move on and learn from this experience. Oscar, who's also going to be joining as a panelist, is asking whether we're going to be permitting our audience questions. So we've been getting a lot of chat messages, Oscar, and time permitting, we will. But I'll hand over now to the wonderful Amy. Over to you, Amy.
Hey, thank you. Well, let's say that our panel, which will be Oscar, Allison, and myself, we're going to be looking at the issue of listening. And I was really pleased that Oscar was a panelist, because I've been a communication coach for a while and an ESL teacher and a speech coach. And as I've been dealing with different audiences with different needs, I've been realizing that what's been lacking for a lot of people is the ability to listen. And when I was dealing with international students looking for a job, or I was looking at people that haven't been able to find work for a while, this was in context of me being a trainer for Jesuit social services. I realized that for a lot of these people, their idea of communicating was waving a resume in people's faces and saying, just give me a job, I'll take any job. And they didn't have a sense of communication being a two-way, at least a two-way street, where curiosity should be engaged, active listening should be engaged. And so what I'd like our panelists to talk about is the notion of listening, especially in a multicultural situation. So the question I asked Oscar and Allison to think about, and certainly they can change it in some ways, is active and empathic listening is crucial in fostering intercultural communication in order to dispel stereotypes and alleviate fear. So with that, I would like to perhaps have both Oscar and Allison introduce themselves, if that's possible. And then let's just take the conversation from there. Is that okay? So let's start. Oscar, can you talk a little about yourself?
My least favorite topic is talking about myself. I'm on a quest to create 100 million deep listeners in the world. I love listening to other people, and me talking about myself isn't something that particularly excites me. But I've been fortunate enough to have a 30-year corporate career in technology and telecommunications. So it's really interesting to notice where we're at right now with the understanding machine-based learning and artificial intelligence as it relates to what we were speaking about earlier on. I think for all of us, we need to understand it's not AI versus the human, it's AI and the human. And the thing for me that everybody needs to understand, if you were to think about AI and machine learning as a human, they are about the level of a 5-year-old right now in terms of the way that they can think, process, and make meaning from things. To your specific question, Amy, I think the most critical thing that people think about when it comes to empathetic and active listening is being focused on the speaker and the person speaking. That's absolutely an interesting place, but it's the wrong place to start. You need to start with listening to yourself. And if all of us know right now, we're processing a lot more than what's going on this webinar right now. We're processing family and friends and health. We're processing a mindset that's juggling between figuring it out and freaking out right now. And at the moment, although I can speak at 125 words a minute, I have 900 words a minute trapped inside my head trying to get out. And for all of us right now, I think the most important thing we need to do is acknowledge the context we find ourselves in. Notice that people won't be able to find the words immediately in this current context to explain what's going on. And this is doubly difficult for people where English isn't their first language and they're being asked to express thoughts and feelings right now in a language that's not familiar to them. So we need to be conscious that listening right now takes longer. Listening right now needs to be something that you need to prepare yourself for, and you to understand that you've got a radio station playing in your head right now called Corona 19, and that radio station frequency can be tuned right up if you're devouring social media, or tuned right down if you're taking a very much a fatalistic approach to what's going on. So there's a lot of literature about active listening, but very little of that literature, Amy, is designed to help you become a listening vessel yourself, because most of us have a radio station playing in our own head.
Okay, that's very helpful. Can you talk about, Oscar, since I gather Allison isn't logged in, so it's going to be you and me, I suppose, and anyone else that wants to chime in. One thing I noticed in dealing with people is the lack of what seems to me to be a lack of curiosity about others. I don't know if that comes from fear or in what space it comes from. But whenever I've dealt with clients, for example, who have lived in this country for years and didn't really know very much about Australian culture, just hadn't been observing their coworkers, their friends, and hadn't even made connections that they're assuming that if a person teases them, for example, that could be a lack of face, and they would get upset about that. I had a Japanese client, for example, and I think I mentioned this to you, where she didn't understand when colleagues would tease her or her husband, that it was actually in this country, it's a note of acceptance, that if an Aussie teases you, often you're doing okay. And she considered that to be a loss of faith. And she hadn't observed that this was a compliment to her. So can you talk about the role of curiosity? Can we develop curiosity? Since you're talking about how to get in a space of being able to be a good listener, how does one develop wanting to be curious, wanting to be open to others, wanting to understand without getting one's too active brain get in the way?
I think curiosity is something you're born with. It's not something you need to develop. In fact, when you think about Michelangelo's David, he didn't look at the rock and figure out how to carve David. He just wanted to carve out the bits of the rock that were unnecessary. And for a lot of us, curiosity is what's getting in our way as adults, as all sorts of other information comes about. So if we have the curiosity of a child, if we go back to that curious state, and I think the difference is our attention in on us or is our attention out on them? I think curiosity lives in the space where your attention is out, where your attention is forward, where your attention is on others, as opposed to it's about me, it's about my fears, it's about my tensions right now. So just noticing that, even this week with my clients, last week with my clients, there's two kinds of clients. There's the clients who are curious and seeing this as a wonderful way to translate a future. And they talk about everything is different now, whereas other clients where their attention is in on themselves, the curiosity isn't quite there. They talk about the world has changed in the future and they don't realize the change is now. So I think for all of us, curiosity are layers that are built over by experience, by education, and by our learning. My daughter-in-law got hit by a car when she was riding her bike. And she's a judo player, so she has a very high pain tolerance, picked up her bike and went to a local emergency surgery with a mangled bike and saw the emergency surgery doctor. For most of us listening right now, because we're not curious, we're visualizing a male over 50 and someone really experienced, but the doctor she saw was a very young female with an Indian background. And all our listening filters right now, when we process that story about Jen taking her bike to emergency surgery, whatever doctor we visualized is probably not the doctor that I explained actually turned up. And that's a good example of being curious and putting away listening assumptions and filters when it comes to curiosity, Amy.
Amy, I wanted to step in. Sorry to interrupt you, but we do
Sure.
have other panelists.
Good.
You might not be able to see on your screen, but we have Maria, we have Rana, we have
Excellent.
and Katriana. So I think it's a matter of how your screen is set. But if you'd like, I can.
Can you see me as well?
Yeah, so it's the screen set, and you see everybody lined up waiting.
Okay, I wasn't sure if there were different panels, so I wasn't sure if there were different topics that different people were going to get involved with. So
that's it.
I don't know if I can disagree with all three speakers.
Yes, go for it.
So my name's David Finkelstein. I started off as a biologist. We are social animals. We have a very high social structure, and I believe that we are innately curious. And in fact, our curiosity today is causing the problems with communication and social structure. And I'll give you the example of the COVID information. And I do hope that eventually that artificial intelligence will help us, because I don't think people are very good at this. And for example, I just heard an interview with Australian Nobel laureate Peter Doherty. He explained in exquisite detail all of the things that are going to happen with COVID. Then the science reporter inaccurately summarized the whole of the conversation and created fear and anxiety, and the whole purpose of the reporter's information was to disseminate what they wanted rather than what the people spoke. Now, this isn't, and because of our lack of, because we have a social structure that causes us to interact in specific ways. And my specialty is Parkinson's disease. And where people with Parkinson's disease, they're all ethnic problems, and we'll go back to that later, but they don't have the normal facial emotions. So they are completely misunderstood by society. They are kicked out of pubs, they're kicked out of the office, and they're sacked because they believe they are drunk at the workplace. I think that communication is essential, but we do it badly, and current technology is letting us down. And it is disenfranchising more and more communities, and we are currently working on how to fix that. So the concept that Travis and Agatha were trying to portray about AI is going to be there, I think that's fantastic. Oscar, I disagree with you entirely, but that's part of the conversation. That it's our definition of curiosity is really the difficulty here. So I just wanted to put that little bit of oil on a flame, and I'll be quiet now.
Thank you. Perhaps we could get Maria to speak, who's been quietly digesting all this information.
Well, I've certainly been listening to a fair bit of it, but can I just start before I say anything? I think it's really important when we are talking about communication that we recognise that it's in the context of a rich, multilingual, multi-ethnic First Nations context. And I do want to start by saying that for the Victorian Multicultural Commission, a very important part of our engagement and communication is really ensuring that our multicultural communities engage in respectful and I think responsible inquiry about, 80,000 years of history of First Nations people in this country. So I do want to start by paying my respects to the traditional owners of the land. It's certainly a big part of the work that the VMC will be doing at the moment, is really extending that communication to others. You'll have to excuse me. These days we worry about having a sore throat or a potential sort of cold and lapse into some sort of panic, but it is my voice that keeps coming in and out. Look, obviously from the VMC's perspective, there are positives and there are limitations around technology now more than ever before. I think we're being challenged to think outside the box. Here we all are working at home and thinking about how we engage in these kind of multi-contextual, multi-sort of cultural, really, environments. So certainly the challenges are there. But for us, we really want to use this as an opportunity, I think, to try and explore meaningful and effective ways of engaging with people despite some of those limitations. Certainly, I think technology has its pluses. When I think about our multicultural communities and the fact that technology enables the diaspora to stay connected, I mean, in a sort of interconnectivity sort of context, the irony often is, isn't it, that at a time when politicians are desperate to close borders and migration is such a politicised thing, that the internet, in fact, has exploded It's almost like the borderless universe and enabled so much communication to take place. So there are obvious benefits in terms of some of that capacity that technology as a platform enables. And as I said, that connection with diaspora, which is such a big part of successful settlement for migrant communities, is really, really important. But this idea, I think, of curiosity is something that in a culturally rich, linguistically rich environment and society, and we're so proud that in Victoria we do this particularly well, that we'd like to see greater focus on multilingual environments. I think this over-emphasis on English as the primary mechanism through which we can make inquiry needs to be reframed. We need to start being curious about other languages and linguistic contexts. Sadly, I think if we can't do that by recognising, to use Professor Marcia Langton's research, there are still well over 180 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages in this country. If we can't even value the extraordinary richness and wealth of that reality and that truth, then trying to introduce greater value to linguistic diversity continues to be a challenge, whether it's through translation and interpreting or not. And the final comment I guess I want to make is that for us at the VMC, all of these things have to happen through the context of a rights-based lens. I think irrespective of what might be going on, we really need to remember that for those that are most vulnerable in our communities, an analysis of any tool of communication has to start through a human rights lens. Are we inclusive when we think about the potential audience for communication? Are we thinking through the lens of equity and inclusion when we're thinking about messaging? When we're thinking about the appropriate or the type of use of technology? Are we cognizant of the reality of sophisticated and intersectional lives out there? So for us, these are the kinds of questions that we need to be asking whenever we're trying to frame the whole concept of what does effective communication in a multilingual, multicultural context look like, and to recall that this is something that we have to work through together. And that's something very important.
Thank you, Maria. I'd like to ask RANA, going on your last statement, I'd like to ask RANA about what do you feel are the most challenges facing people to develop effective communication in a multilinguistic context? You've been dealing a lot with cultural communication and inclusion. Could you add what you think are the main issues?
Well, I really enjoyed all of the conversation. Thank you so much. I also wanted to start with acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the elders, past and present and emerging, and any elder from any other community. I hope I get old soon and I become an elder. But the effect of it, I think, between David and the other conversations, Oscar especially, I should get something in the middle, because to me it's like an onion with different layers, and or can be a spectrum that has two sides of the spectrum. So curiosity and culture are very similar in this aspect, because culture definitely will affect the level of curiosity, the type of curiosity, and the context that you are living in, because even the definition of the curiosity can be different in different cultures. And the type of the questions, sometimes you hear questions from people from different cultures that mean disrespectful to you, but it's because of your definition of that question. So yeah, definitely, I think it should be a mixture and an understanding that all of these are standing on this spectrum and can be different, and there are so many different layers of factors that are affecting our curiosity level and the culture. So if you define it like this, there is no you're wrong, I'm right. There is something in the middle. That's the beauty of negotiation and active listening and understanding, because that's the positive side of, because we want to be positive today. The beauty of that is that curiosity brings questions, and it makes human beings more connected to each other. And connecting my discussion to what Maria said, exactly, I can see it in the these days work from home and communication and human side of it, because for us as diasporas, it's a long term that we use WhatsApp and online communication to contact our families and ask from them and keep this distance less. But at the same time, because it's online, the level of the type of the talk that we have is different. Like, for example, I was thinking, all of us are somehow excited because we are online. It's a different type of presentation, and we don't know what's going on, checking technology, checking so many different things to get onto what we want to say and forget some parts, actually. That's because it's something new to us. So it's becoming the new normal, and our curiosity will let us to get used to it very soon, because we are adaptable. We are sociable animals that we can find a way to communicate with each other.
Okay, thank you. If I could ask, if we could switch back to AI, this is a naive question. Can artificial intelligence be trained to be curious? Anyone?
So AI is trained by humans who are innately curious. So yes, unfortunately, when you reduce thoughts, ideas, concepts, theories into binary code, a lot of human biases are overlaid in what happens with AI. When AI moves from being a toddler to a teenager, maybe that's a possibility, but not in the short term.
Okay. Is David there? No, I think David left. Okay.
No, I'm here. I just muted. I'm here.
What do you think, David?
So AI is, I agree with, so I can say I agree with something with Oscar. AI is in its infancy. We all see its potential. So I think we're going to use our cultural ties, and seeing this is about culture, and I'll give an example. We have to use our cultural base to strengthen the AI intelligence. For Parkinson's disease, and that's all I talk about because it's my passion, is a very difficult disease. It's multifactorial, and it's treated differently by all cultures. And I'm not going to name some of the cultures around our region, but around our region, it is very commonly thought that Parkinson's disease is caused by a curse or witch doctors. We have our communities in Australia have left those belief systems behind, and I believe we can use our people to translate to the mother countries. Oscar didn't mention that artificial intelligence is based on a set of premises. What I'm saying now is that yes, we need an artificial intelligence, but those premises that we base them on are human and ethical. We cannot forget this human context and the ethical context of of the AI base. And I suppose Elon Musk is saying how dangerous AI is, and yes, unregulated AI is dangerous. But we are already implementing AI in making health decisions and many other things. It has to have a human face, a human ethical base, and a cultural base to be relevant.
And Agatha, how would you respond to that?
Sorry, I was on mute. So yeah, I also agree that it may be possible to train AI, but I personally don't believe that AI can be at the same level as humans are. They may getting like closer and closer, but in the next, I don't know, even 50, 100 years, I'm not sure if we will be able to train it in like the creative aspect.
Can we hear from Katriana?
Hi,
I think you're on mute. Katriana, you need to unmute. No?
Can you not hear me?
Not loud.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
I hear you a little bit.
Trying to work that out. I might say a couple of words about how it's affecting the translation and interpreting industry, because what we've been seeing, so 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if somebody said to us, machines are going to be producing language, we'd laugh, because the attempts at doing so were quite limited, I guess. But nowadays, between languages such as, say, English and French, the quality of what we're receiving from machines, I guess, is a lot better than what it has been. And I think that's going to improve. My question is this: yes, we can, but should we? So I sort of echo David's comment here about ethics. Because yes, we can get machines to write books, but do we want to read them? Do we actually want this side of the, creative, what humanity is all about, to give out or give up to machines is the question that we have. So I think the ethics of how we communicate, we've already crossed that border, I feel, where those lines have been crossed a long time ago. So I think it is maybe a matter of us pulling back and just thinking about where robots, machines should be helping us. Is it good? Is it for evil? These are questions that we need to ask ourselves, diligently, and have answers that work for humanity, not for big corporations, or it's not about money, it's about how we connect together. So I'm not sure if Katriana can now come in.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, wonderful.
I'm not sure how well I can address that particular question. So I'm an immunologist, so also like David, a biologist, but I'm also a science communicator, so I've heard a lot of talks and things like that. And just sort of on both your question, I couldn't see a screen, but I think that was from Eva, as well as the last question. There are a lot of times when AI and machine learning, it's learning from children. And going back to Oscar's point earlier of, children sort of have an innate curiosity that we can sometimes lose later in life. When the AI is learning with children, it kind of picks that up. But again, like ethics kind of comes into that. Do we only want, certain groups of people to be training? And that's where the next kind of question is looked at, in terms of you needing to have an exposure to diverse groups, children and adults. Otherwise, you are just sort of biasing something. And if all the AI is being developed by big companies, then that have a certain group of people kind of as part of that development, you're having that inherent bias in the AI and what it's being able to think, how it's being able to like computate anything really. Did that address the question?
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I think ethics is always quite far behind where the technology is. So even though I think we don't necessarily, it's not a problem now, we don't have to think about, you know, how is AI going to be involved in this process yet, but always ethics will lag behind. So I think it is a good idea to start asking, you know, what is the potential for AI and what's right and wrong kind of with that.
Can I just also offer a view? I mean, I'm always a little cynical about, let's take Google Translate. I think certainly, you know, there's a role for machine translations in that regard. If you're trying to, you know, order something during travel, or you're trying to get directions. But my worry is, does that diminish the actual value of learning another language, perhaps? How does it work when, in my view, certainly at this stage in technological development, that whole idea of cultural coding, I mean, as I think interpreters and translators know better than most, literal translation simply doesn't work. As someone who's worked for a long time in the legal context, in courtroom environments, where your personal liberty is at risk here if the accuracy, the effectiveness of that interpreting falls short of what it is that you're needing to convey in a legal setting, that has massive implications. And I do worry that in essential contexts or environments, we're not realising that there are still far too many or too much scope for error in machine translations. And in my view, Google Translate can never replace the qualified, competent, talented interpreter or translator who's able to identify the significance of that cultural context, of the nuances and the sophistication in that. And finally, and I keep harping on about this, I actually want to go back to valuing and recognising that the learning of languages is something that should be celebrated, that can't be reduced down to a machine.
And certainly as part of that, there has been some comments that people have been making. You know, one person talked about that idioms, which is only skimming the surface of what you were talking about, Maria, but so much of language is idioms. And these idioms can have centuries long history behind each idiom. They're nuanced. So can AI in a cultural context deal with these idioms? Is that something that could happen in the future?
Well, I'd be interested in knowing, given I'm of a certain age and perhaps technology for a long time, I think certainly used to terrify me. But I think, and that's where the digital divide is really, isn't it? But as technology increases in its impact and its expanse and we realise its value, I'm increasingly coming to a point where I'm trying not to see these in binary terms as an either or, but I do worry about the way that technology then overshadows the significance of human communication and the significance of that direct interaction. That's probably where I'm at. I certainly can't offer a sophisticated response in terms of, you know, technology and all of those issues. But, you know, for me, Google can never guarantee that translation, say, in a family violence context is going to be as effective as having someone in that room qualified interpreter being able to also share some of those insights into the broader cultural contexts, those non-verbal nuances, as you mentioned. That to me is the value, and I'm a very, very strong supporter of our friends who are interpreters and translators. If anything, I lament the lack of value that's attached to that industry in this country.
It's interesting.
So these were all very, very good points, and I think the value of languages, the value of language learning, and the value of communication is sometimes somewhat lost amongst all the technology that we're developing, as if removing the language barrier is somehow beneficial. You know, so it is in a sense that, you know, by machines, I mean. So it is in a sense, you know, you are in, you know, Italy, you don't speak Italian, you want to know how to buy a loaf of bread. That's great. But in any other context where that human contact of an interpreter is more beneficial, I guess, than the language that the language gap that we're bridging, that needs to be considered, you know, whether it's in clinical situations, legal situations, in you know, any other time. At this time, we, you know, this webinar is a very good example of how we're trying to communicate today, and it's been pretty challenging. I don't know about you guys, but you know, apart from technology, you know, managing people, you know, there are people behind the scenes and you don't know this, and I'm sitting here smiling, but there are people that haven't been able to log in, that cannot hear us, that, you know, there's so many things that are bringing so much frustration to the fore, that we do have a lot of learning. So there's, like, for me, the society is kind of working in two speed. On one hand, we have these wonderful inventions, and, you know, we can be talking with everybody from home, and on the other hand, there's so many things that are still very, very inefficient, very frustrating, exclusive even, to people who are, you know, just not able to tap into everything that we've developed as humans. So I think if we can bring that digital gap to you know, to the platform that everybody can access, that is the biggest challenge, more than I feel trying to develop yet newer technology and yet newer ways of communicating. Let's get on the same platform, so that we can tap into these things at a time that we need. And I think that's quite uneven still. Like it's a the way I see it is that there are lots of people that are very au fait with a lot of things, and there are those that aren't. So I think I'm just going to check the time, and I think I've just got a very, very quick wrap up. And I really wanted to thank everybody sincerely, firstly for participating. We had close to 100 people, I think, at some points listening to us. To all the panelists, also to Amy. I know it's been a bit of a challenge, and not everyone got to say what they wanted to say, but that's okay. We will meet again face-to-face, whenever that is. We will make sure that the forum still goes ahead. So thank you to Agatha, to Travis, to Amy for trying to manage everyone's conversations, to RANA, to Oscar, to David that disagreed, and that's good. I love it, because we do need to show different you know, perspectives of what we have to say, to Catriona, who's contributed, to Alison, who is unfortunately hasn't been able to hear us or log in properly. But just lastly, I wanted to just say a few words about what we've learned today. And I think listening to everyone, I did learn a lot. I think the main message that I am taking away today from you all is that context is king. So there are, you know, as they say, horses for courses, or whatever the saying is. So yes, technology, yes, machine translation when it's appropriate. It's knowing what's appropriate, that's a challenge. But I think what we were trying to promote here today is that good communication is exploding internet is exploding, borderless communication, which is something that Maria's mentioned, that we do want to be proud of the fact that we speak 300 languages in Australia, that we do want to continue learning languages, value languages, and to be curious about them. Technology is there to assist us. It's not to replace us. It's to help us be better humans, I think. I think the other thing that we've heard from all panelists is that we want to be more inclusive when we think about messages, particularly to address to people whose, English isn't their first language, or they might have literacy learning issues. And we do need to work together and not to forget the human context, the ethical considerations. So on that note, I will end this digital webinar. It's been a massive experiment. I truly, truly thank sincerely everybody that's participated. If we have to do it again, it'll be a better experience for everyone. So we will keep in touch. Whenever we're ready, we're going to do this face-to-face. So thank you, everyone, sincerely.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.